Have you ever stopped to think about how you see the world? I mean, really think about it? What if I told you that the solid, stable reality you see all around you isn't really solid at all? What if it's just a kind of habit, a mental shortcut that your brain takes every single second of every day? Today, we're going to dive into this idea of a crystalline universe and explore what it might mean to see beyond that veil of our own habits.
We're going to start with this line from the Diamond Sutra. Just let that sink in for a second. The past mind, the future mind, the present mind, none of it can be grasped. It immediately kind of pulls the rug out from under our feet, doesn't it? If we can't even get a firm grip on the mind that's doing the perceiving, then what does that say about the reality it's perceiving? So, let's start with how we normally see things. This first part is all about our everyday, filtered way of looking at the world. The source material has a great term for it, our calcified perception. Okay, think about a chair. When you look at one, are you really seeing that specific, unique arrangement of wood and fabric and the way the light hits it? Probably not. Your brain just goes, chair, and boom, it's done. It's a mental shortcut, right? A concept built from every other chair you've ever seen. It's super efficient, but in that process, we totally lose the raw sensory data of what's right in front of us.
Now, this whole process, this calcification, it's not a mistake. It's actually a survival mechanism. Imagine if you had to process every single detail of every object all day long. You'd be completely overwhelmed. We need these shortcuts. But, and this is a huge but, there's a trade-off. It dulls our experience. It creates a kind of spiritual blindness to what's actually there, in all its raw, vibrant detail. So, if our normal view is calcified, what's the alternative? This brings us to the core idea of this whole explainer, a universe that's described as crystalline. And I have to stress this, we are not talking about some kind of fantasy or hallucination. It's presented as a clarification of reality, a clearer way of seeing.
So what does this clarified reality even look like? Well, the idea is that in states of really deep, stable attention, the dense, solid world we take for granted starts to shift. The hard boundaries between things start to soften. Objects can appear radiant, almost translucent. And you begin to perceive the deep, profound interconnections between everything. It's a reality made of dynamic relationships, not just a collection of separate, solid things.
Now, it is absolutely crucial that we make a distinction here. This state of crystalline insight is not the same as a drug-induced trip, not at all. Sure, certain substances can temporarily shake up our mental filters, but that experience is often unstable and unreliable. The insight we're exploring here is described as a permanent, sober removal of these obscuring habits, something achieved through mental purification and training, not through any kind of external substance.
Okay, so that's a pretty natural question, right? If this clearer reality is always available, then why on earth don't we see it all the time? Well, the answer lies in these powerful habitual filters our minds have built up.
And this right here, this gets to the absolute heart of the matter. We think we're seeing the present moment exactly as it is, but we're almost always seeing it through this thick, heavy filter of the past. We see an object, a place, a person, and our mind instantly slaps on all our memories, labels, and judgments. We're not seeing them. We're seeing our idea of them.
Let's break this down side by side because it makes it super clear. On the left, that's our standard perception. We see solid, separate objects. We see them through the filter of memory. We feel like a static observer looking at it. And what happens? An immediate emotional reaction. I like it, I don't like it. But on the right, you have crystalline insight. It's a direct, preconceptual seeing. The boundary between you and the object becomes fluid. And because of that, our automatic reactions are suspended. It's the difference between projecting onto the world and actually perceiving it.
So where do all these projections and habits even come from? The Yogacara school of Buddhism has this absolutely fascinating concept for it. It's called Alaya Vijnana, or storehouse consciousness. Just think of it like a deep, vast repository in your mind that holds the seeds of every single one of your past thoughts and actions. And these seeds, they are constantly ripening and conditioning how you experience this very moment. The philosopher Asanga summed it up perfectly. Every single thing we think and do plants a seed that will eventually ripen into a future experience. It creates this continuous feedback loop that builds and reinforces our habits of perception and reaction. It's what makes our world feel so solid and predictable. So that's the big question, isn't it? How in the world do we break this cycle? Well, the
The path to doing that involves freeing the present moment through something called the insight of emptiness. What does it mean to free a phenomenon? This sounds pretty abstract, but it's actually simple. It's about stopping that habit of instantly labeling and shutting down our experience. It's about allowing yourself to see something, a tree, a sound, a feeling, as if it's the very first time without all the baggage of your old interpretations. It's just about meeting reality with fresh eyes. And this leads us to this incredibly important concept of sunyata, or emptiness. Now look, it's so important to get this right. The word emptiness can sound like a bleak, sad, empty void, but that is not it at all. In fact, it's the total opposite. It means that things lack a permanent, solid, independent core. It means they are fluid, interconnected, and constantly changing. Emptiness is pure potential. You've probably heard this famous line from the Heart Sutra before, and it just captures this beautiful paradox perfectly. The solid world of form and the fluid reality of emptiness. They aren't two different things. They are two sides of the exact same coin. The chair is form, but its ever-changing, interdependent nature is its emptiness.
All right, so what actually happens when we start to perceive this fluidity in the world around us? Our final section is going to explore this perceptual shift using a really powerful metaphor, the elemental cascade.
Okay, check out this table. Don't think of these as literal elements, but as stages in how our perception solidifies. Everything starts with pure, open awareness. That's space. From that potentiality, the first flicker of movement or vibration arises. That's wind. This gives way to energy and dynamism. That's fire. That energy then begins to cohere into patterns. That's water. And only at the very, very end of this process does our experience finally harden into what we call earth, or solid, separate things.
So the whole point, the real goal here, is to learn to see the process within the final product. It's about looking at that solid table, the earth, and being able to perceive the underlying vibration, energy, and cohesion, the wind, fire, and water, that are constantly making it what it is. It's about seeing that nothing is ever truly static. And, this insight leads to a really profound realization, captured perfectly here in the Dhammapada. Everything that is put together must, eventually, come apart. That's just the nature of reality. And understanding this deeply with real wisdom isn't a downer. It's what ultimately frees us from so much of our struggle and dissatisfaction.
So, we'll just end with this question for you to think about. If we could truly, even for a moment, suspend all our habits, our memories, our relentless mental projections, if all the labels we constantly slap onto reality just fell away, what would actually remain?
All right, let's get right into it. We're going to tackle one of the biggest questions there is. Are you actually in control of your life, or are you just a cog in some giant machine you can't even see? This explainer breaks down a really powerful way to look at fate, freedom, and the reality you think you're living in. So, just look at this image for a second. It really captures the whole dilemma, doesn't it? Are you that calm figure at the center, consciously steering the gears of your life? Or are you just one of the gears, being spun around by forces you're not even aware of? That's the core question we're digging into today. Or here's another way to put it. Is your story already written? Like, is there a script you're just forced to follow word for word? Or are you the one holding the pen? Now, I know that can sound kind of abstract, but believe me, the answer has some incredibly practical effects on how you live your life, moment by moment. So, to kick things off, we've got to understand the problem itself. What is this script that we all seem to be following, and where in the world does it even come from? Well, the idea here is that we don't actually experience reality as it is. Nope. Instead, we live inside what's called an apparent reality. The best way to think about it is like a mental map. It's this simulation that our mind builds from all our old conditioning, our deepest fears, our gut reflexes, and the biggest mistake we all make, we confuse that map for the actual world. And man, this quote just nails the danger, doesn't it? The real trap is believing our little simulation is the one and only reality. The first step to real wisdom, as this quote points out, isn't about having all the answers. It's just about realizing that we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. Okay, so let's build on that. This next part, this is where we kind of flip the script and redefine the rules of the game. It turns out most of us have been using the wrong words to talk about this problem, and that's kept us totally stuck. First, let's look at this idea of fate. You know the deal. It's the belief that your destiny is totally sealed, set in stone. No matter what you choose to do, the end result is going to be the same. Now, if you truly believe that, what can you do? Nothing. It just leads to passivity. Why even try? But now, contrast that with a much more powerful concept, determinism. This is a totally different beast. It doesn't say outcomes are fixed. It just says that results come from specific conditions. It's basically the law of cause and effect. It's not some mystical destiny. It's just mechanics. And if you understand the mechanics, you can start to work with the machine. So here's the difference in a nutshell. Fate says, hey, don't bother, your efforts are useless. Determinism says the exact opposite. It says, hey, if you change this one condition, you will change the result. One makes you want to give up. The other invites you, even challenges you to take skillful action. And this is the absolute key. We don't live in a world of fate. We live in a world of determinism. Seneca just hits it out of the park here. Look, the laws of cause and effect are going to operate whether you like it or not. The only choice you really have is how you engage with them. You can either understand the system and work with it willingly, or you can ignore it and just get dragged along for the ride by your own unexamined habits. So, if we aren't just helpless victims of fate, but we're players in a big system of cause and effect, how do we get good at playing the game? Well, this next section is all about the single most powerful tool you have in your toolkit. I love this analogy from Greek mythology. See, most of us operate like Epimetheus. His name literally means afterthought. We act on an impulse first and only think about it later, usually when we're cleaning up the mess. The goal is to be more like his brother, Prometheus, which means forethought, to create a little space, a gap, between a stimulus and our response. So here's what that forethought looks like in the real world. Step 1, an impulse just arises. A flash of anger, a sudden craving for something, bam. It's just your old programming kicking in. Step 2 is the magic. It's the gap. You just pause. You see the impulse, you observe it, but you don't immediately act. And in that tiny moment of stillness, step 3 suddenly becomes possible. You get to make a conscious choice. You get to decide. And that's what Joseph Campbell is getting at right here. The life we planned is really just that old script, the one written by our unconscious habits. Letting go of that script, which you do by creating that pause, is how you discover the life of real freedom that's just waiting for you. All right, so what happens when you get good at this? What does it actually feel like when you start to consistently break that cycle of just reacting to everything? In Buddhist psychology, they actually have a word for this breakthrough moment. It's called sotapanna, which means stream enterer. It describes someone who has fundamentally shifted their relationship with their own mind. They're no longer being pushed around and compelled by their old habits and history. This leads to this amazing idea of functional freedom. And look, it doesn't mean you become some kind of robot who feels nothing. That impulse to get angry, it might still show up. But the difference, and this changes everything, is you don't automatically identify with it. You don't think, I am angry. You see it as an event. Ah, anger is arising. You don't mistake it for you. And because of that, the whole reactive loop just breaks. This table maps out the whole progression beautifully. Most of us start as a worldling. An instinct pops up, we see it as me, and we obey it. Our behavior is actually pretty predictable. But then, the stream enterer learns to see that same instinct as just foreign data. And because of that, they gain the freedom to break the chain. And as you can see, there are even higher stages where those instincts themselves just start to fade away. It's a clear path from very little freedom to a whole lot of it. So this brings us right to the final and most important question. We can't just step outside the laws of the universe, right? We can't escape the machine of causality. So what on earth is freedom really? And here's the answer. Freedom isn't about escape. It's about skillful navigation. It's the difference between being a piece of driftwood, getting tossed around by the currents of cause and effect, and being the captain of a ship, using your deep understanding of those very same currents to steer wherever you choose to go. And this leaves us with such a powerful final image. You've got the raw material of your life, your conditioning, your history, your instincts. It's just like a carpenter with a block of wood. The job isn't to wish the wood was something else. The job is to pick up the tools of awareness and skillfully shape what you've been given into something new. The real power isn't in escaping the machine. It's in learning how to get in the driver's seat.
So what if the you that you think of as you isn't a single solid thing at all? What if it's actually an incredibly fast, dynamic process?
Today, we're going to deconstruct one of the biggest mysteries out there, consciousness, and we'll see how understanding it as a stream of moments can pretty much change everything. Let's dive in.
Let me just start by asking you this. Right now, the you who's listening, do you feel like a solid, continuous self? Kind of like a little person inside your head looking out at the world? Yeah, most of us do. But what if that feeling, that solidness, is really just an illusion, one that's being built moment by moment by moment? You see, according to the framework we're exploring today, consciousness isn't some static thing. It's a stream. It's this rapid-fire succession of individual moments, and each tiny moment is shaped and colored by our intentions, our habits, and what we're perceiving right now. It really is less like a solid rock and a whole lot more like a flowing river.
Okay, so if it's a stream, how do you even begin to break it down? Well, we start at the most fundamental level, where our consciousness actually makes contact with the world. We're going to call these the 6 doors of perception.
So check this out. This table breaks down our experience perfectly. We don't just have one big general awareness. Nope. Instead, we have these very specific types of consciousness that only pop up at a specific door. You've got eye consciousness for seeing, ear consciousness for hearing, you get the picture. But pay close attention to that 6th door, the mind. Because as we're about to see, that's the gateway to a whole other level of complexity. And here is the absolute crucial point from this first part. Consciousness is conditional. It's not some free-floating ghost in the machine that's always on. Seeing, for example, only happens when 3 things click together. You need the eye, you need a visual object like a color, and you need that specific type of consciousness that links them. If you take any one of those parts away, like if your attention is totally somewhere else, that moment of seeing literally just doesn't happen.
All right, so that's how stuff from the outside world gets in. Now, let's go a layer deeper. Let's start peeling back the layers of the mind itself to see what happens next.
So this next model, it maps the mind's depth in 8 layers. The first 5, that's just raw data coming through those sense doors we just talked about. It's pure sensation. Think red, loud, hot, before your mind has even had a chance to slap a label on it. Then, layer 6 kicks in, the discriminative mind. This is basically the processor. It's that busy interpreter that takes all that raw data and gives it a name. You know, saying, ah, that's a rose, or that's my favorite song.
And after the mind labels it, what happens? Well, appropriation. Layer 7 is the ego mind. It grabs that experience and makes it personal. I see the rose. I don't like this music. This is where that solid sense of me and mine really comes into play. And then underneath all of that is the 8th layer, the storehouse consciousness. Just think of it like the deep, fertile soil of your mind, where the imprints or seeds of every single past action you've ever taken are stored, waiting to sprout and shape your future. And this image here, it's just a beautiful map of that entire inner landscape, isn't it? You can really see that journey from the outer senses moving inward through all those layers of interpretation and self-reference, all the way down to that deep foundational core we were just talking about. So we've seen the structure, right? The doors and the layers. But now we get to what I think is the most important part, the part that actually helps us change our experience, the ethical quality of each moment. What is the karmic flavor of this tiny, fleeting instant of consciousness? Okay, so this framework classifies every single moment of consciousness, they call it citta, into one of 4 categories. Is the moment unwholesome, rooted in things like greed or anger? Is it wholesome, rooted in kindness or wisdom? Or is it resultant, just the passive effect of something that happened in the past? Or finally, is it functional, which is just pure awareness, like what an enlightened person might experience? Each one plants a different kind of seed for the future. And this, right here, brings us to the most practical and powerful distinction in this entire model. I mean, it all boils down to understanding the difference between the stuff that you simply inherit from the past and the things you actively choose to create right now. So, on one side, you've got resultant consciousness. Think of it as the echo. It's that sudden pang of sadness that comes out of nowhere, the physical pain from an old injury, that mood that just descends on you. You can't control this. It's just the harvest of past actions. It's the wave hitting the shore. But then, and this is everything, you have active consciousness. This is your response. This is the choice. Do you meet that pain with anger, which is an unwholesome action that just plants another negative seed? Or do you meet it with mindfulness, a wholesome action that plants a positive one? This is the only place where real change can actually happen.
Okay, so let's bring this all together.
After deconstructing consciousness into all these doors and layers and ethical moments, what is the single most powerful takeaway for our actual lives? Well, it's the profound power of the response.
Look, you can't go back and unstub your toe. You can't prevent a bad mood that's been conditioned by years of habit from showing up at your door. You simply cannot change the echo of what has already been done.
But in that tiny, active moment of consciousness that follows the echo, you have a choice. That is your moment of power. That is your leverage point. The real work isn't in fighting the old results, it's in choosing, shaping the new responses. And that is how the entire stream of your consciousness begins to change direction. You know, there's this quote from Sayadaw U Pandita that just captures it all so perfectly. In the blink of an eye, everything changes, like clouds before the wind. By just watching this stream, by seeing the moments come and go, we can stop trying to hold on to some solid self and instead learn how to skillfully navigate the flow.
So, we'll leave you with this question to ponder. If you aren't a single solid thing, but you are a flowing stream of moments, which one of those moments, right now, will you choose to shape?
You've heard of karma, right? That whole what goes around comes around idea. But what if I told you that the popular image of karma as some kind of cosmic judge is, well, completely missing the point? Today we're going to look at what really drives karma. And here's a hint. It's not some force out there in the universe. It's an engine running inside your own mind, every single moment. Let's see how it works. See, to really get a handle on this, we can't just look at what people do on the outside. The real action, the moment that truly defines everything that follows, happens right in here, in this inner world where choices are made and consequences are born. So this is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Is there some great universal accountant up there keeping a detailed spreadsheet of all our good and bad deeds? It's a really common belief, for sure. But the material we're looking at today points to something much more direct and, honestly, a lot more personal. And this is where it gets really interesting. The absolute key to unlocking karma isn't the action you take. It's not even the result of that action. It's that tiny, almost invisible mental spark, that impulse that happens in the split second before you do anything at all. So, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll bust some myths about what karma actually is. Then, we'll go right into the engine room to find this thing called volition. We'll see how we literally forge our own chains, moment by moment. We'll look at the 3 colors of our intentions, explore the wild idea of acting without creating karma, and then, most importantly, we'll talk about how to find the space to change it all. Okay, first up, let's get this straight from the get-go. We need to stop thinking of karma as a moral code and start seeing it for what it is, a psychological process. And wow, this quote just nails it, doesn't it? It's as clear as day. Karma is the intention. It's the mental setup that comes before you act with your body, your words, or even just your thoughts. The action is just the echo. The intention is the shout. So here's the big takeaway. Karma is clinical, not moral. You know, think of it like gravity. Gravity doesn't punish you for jumping off a roof. It's just a law of physics. Well, karma is like a law of the mind. A certain intention arises. A certain result has to follow. It's not personal. It's just mechanics. Okay, so if intention is karma, what's the specific mental switch that gets flipped? What's the spark plug? To find that, we have to go deep inside, into the engine room of the mind, and find the pivotal axis that everything turns on: volition. So what in the world is volition, or chaitana as it's called? It's basically the will to do. Think of it as the project manager of your mind. It takes all this raw data flooding in, sights, feelings, thoughts, and it organizes everything, points it in a direction, and says, go. Without it, we'd just be passive receivers. With it, we become active creators of our reality. All right, so if volition is the engine, how does it actually lay the tracks for our future? In this section, we're going to become mental detectives and trace the exact cognitive sequence to pinpoint the precise moment we forge our own chains. Okay, check this out, because this is fascinating. This is a slow-motion replay of a single mental moment. First, there's contact. Your eye sees something. Then comes feeling. It's pleasant, unpleasant, or just meh, neutral. Then perception. Your brain labels it. Oh, that's a donut. Now notice this. All 3 of these stages are karmically neutral. They're just data coming in. No karma yet. The binding, the event that creates karma, happens right here at step 4, volition. That's the moment the mind says, I want that donut. Bam. And that's the whole game, right there. That endless cycle of cause and effect only gets another push, another spin at this one stage. It's the instant the mind takes that neutral feeling of pleasant and reacts with a lunge, with either I want it or I hate it. That is the creative act that literally shapes what happens next.
But what gives volition that karmic stickiness? Why does it bind us? Well, this next section looks at the 3 colors, or maybe think of them as flavors of our actions. These are the deep down roots that turn a simple intention into a powerful future-shaping force.
So here they are, the 3 unwholesome roots. First, you've got attachment, or lobha. This is that feeling of hunger, of wanting to pull things toward you, that stickiness. Then you've got its polar opposite, aversion, or dosa, the impulse to push away, to get rid of, to destroy. And finally, you have the sneakiest one, delusion, or moha. This is just a kind of mental fog, a confusion about what's actually going on.
This is the internal soundtrack of attachment. We all know this voice, right? That powerful urge to get something, to own it, to consume it. It's that feeling of, my happiness depends on getting this thing.
And here's the other side of that coin, the inner command of aversion. It's that hot, reactive feeling that something or someone is a threat that just has to be pushed away, silenced, or eliminated from our experience. And this one is probably the most dangerous because it's so quiet. It's not a fiery passion. It's just a dull, foggy indifference. It's that mental shrug that says, whatever, it doesn't matter, which is what allows attachment and aversion to just run wild. So why? Why are we wired with these roots? It all comes back to one fundamental misunderstanding. Our volition, our will, is almost always self-referential. It's organized around this deep, mistaken belief that there's a solid, permanent me in here that needs to be protected, promoted, and pleased at all costs. Now, this all can sound a little bleak, right? Like we're trapped. If every action creates more karma, does that mean we have to stop doing everything? Well, not exactly. This leads us to a really fascinating question. Is it actually possible to act without creating karma? And this slide just lays it out so perfectly. Look at the contrast. On the left, you have our standard operating procedure, karmic consciousness. It's all that me, it's driven by wanting and not wanting, and it constantly generates future results. But on the right, you have functional consciousness. This is a whole different ballgame. It's rooted in wisdom, it's driven by what's needed, and get this, the action ends with itself. It generates no future karmic bill. This is the state of a fully awakened mind. These people aren't zombies. They still act. They eat, they walk, they talk. Their volition is still working, organizing their actions, but it's purely functional. It's clean. Because that core delusion of a separate self is gone, there's nothing for the karma to stick to. The action happens, it's effective, and then it's just over. Okay, so this is all really profound, but how do we even begin to move in that direction? Our last section is all about the practical application. It's about learning how to find the gap in our own minds through this simple practice of recognition. And this right here is the key takeaway. The point isn't to try and stop your thoughts or suppress your will. That's just another kind of struggle, another volition. The real goal is much simpler and also much harder, just to recognize. To learn to notice the flavor of an impulse as it's arising. Is this coming from a place of wanting or fear? By just slowing things down and creating a tiny gap between a feeling and your reaction, you shine a light on the intention. And the incredible thing is, a lot of the time, just seeing it clearly is enough to take away its power. So I'll leave you with this challenge. The next time you feel that powerful urge to act, to check your phone, to say that sharp comment, to buy that thing you don't need, can you just pause for one single second and just ask yourself, what is the intention driving this? The answer might just change everything.
All right, today we're diving into the secret mechanics of your mind. We're talking about that subtle, internal cause and effect that honestly shapes every single moment of your experience. So yeah, we're really getting into the internal world of what we call karma. But listen, not as some kind of cosmic payback system. Think of it more as a straight-up psychological process. It's all about figuring out why we feel what we feel, and understanding how our inner world is in this constant dance between planting seeds and, well, harvesting the fruit. This ancient piece of wisdom, this is really our launching pad. It's telling us that everything we experience is, well, it's filtered through and a lot of the time created by our own minds. So the big question is, how does that actually work? What's the mechanism?
I mean, think about this for a second. Have you ever had one of those days you're doing just fine and then, bam, out of nowhere, this wave of sadness or a sudden spike of irritation just hits you, and you have no idea where it came from? It feels completely random, right? Well, what if it's not? What if it's just a signal from the past, an echo of something you did still ringing in the present?
Okay, so the secret to understanding these strange echoes is knowing that our minds basically work in two totally different modes. There's the part of you that's always creating, and then there's the part that's just receiving.
So on one side, you've got what we can call the active mind. This is your CEO, right? It's the part of you that decides things, that makes choices, that says, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to say that. But then, on the other side, you have the passive mind. And its job is just to experience the results. It takes in all the sights and sounds, feels the moods, and just absorbs the emotional weather of your day.
So let's get a little more specific here. The active phase, and yeah, there's a technical term for it, kusala or akusala chitta, is all about output. It's you making decisions, taking action. This is the part that literally creates your future. And then you've got the passive phase, or vipaka chitta. This is all input. It's you just sensing and feeling. Basically, you're harvesting what you planted earlier.
And that brings us to the key concept for today, resultant consciousness, or that term we just mentioned, vipaka chitta. This is just the fancy name for that echo we started with. It's the direct, physical, felt experience of a past choice finally coming to fruition, right here, right now. The crucial thing to get is this. It's not a new choice you're making. It's an old one just showing up.
And this is such a critical point, you guys. We usually think of karma as this external thing, like, I do a good deed, I find a $20 bill. But it's so much more subtle than that. It's almost entirely an internal process. Like if you're always planting seeds of anger, your resultant consciousness, your passive mind, becomes primed for irritation. You start seeing reasons to be angry everywhere. So karma isn't just the movie playing out in your life, it's the very lens you're watching it through.
Okay, let's make this super concrete. I want to show you how this whole thing creates this powerful and usually unconscious feedback loop in our daily lives. Let's use an example.
So, picture this. Someone steals a sandwich from the office fridge. Okay, step 1 is the seed. That's the choice, the active decision to take it. Step 2, latency. That mental impression gets filed away somewhere deep in the mind. Now fast forward a few months. This is step 3, the fruit. They just hear the name of the person they stole from and bam! This jolt of anxiety or defensiveness just pops up. That feeling, that's it. That's the resultant consciousness. And then comes the really important part, step 4, the reaction. They immediately think, whatever, they deserved it anyway. That new thought, that's a brand new seed, and the whole cycle just gets locked in a little tighter.
This is the whole ballgame right here. That first feeling, that automatic flash of anxiety, that's just the harvest. It's the echo. In and of itself, it's neutral. The real moment of choice, the moment that matters, is what you do next. Your reaction to that feeling, that's what plants the new seed.
So, naturally, this brings us to the million-dollar question, right? If we're all just stuck in these loops, constantly reacting to echoes from our past, how on earth do we break free? How do we stop watering these old, unhelpful seeds?
Because let's be real, you can't stop the fruit from showing up. The feeling is already here. It's landed. So what's the smart move? What's the skillful way to handle it?
All the power lies in the gap. The real work, the breaking of the cycle, it all happens in that tiny, tiny little pause between when the feeling arrives and when we have our usual knee-jerk reaction to it. It's all about finding that space and interrupting the loop.
And in that gap, you've basically got 3 ways you can go. First, there's the default, unskilled option, reaction. We just merge with the feeling, I am angry, and we act it out, which just makes the groove deeper. The second unskilled route is suppression. We try to shove it down, pretend it's not there, which, just creates a whole other set of problems. But there's a third way, the skilled path.
And that skilled path is simply recognition. You just watch the feeling. You see it for what it is. And you can even give it a little mental label. Oh, right, this is vipaka. This is just an old echo playing out. And by doing that, you're making a conscious choice not to pour any more fuel on the fire. You're not adding new stories or reactions. You don't get tangled up in it. You just let the echo fade out on its own. You let the momentum run out without creating a new push.
So, what's the big picture here? What does all this mean? It means we have to totally reframe how we think about karma.
It is not some rigid, unchangeable fate that we're stuck with. No way. It's something much more alive, much more dynamic.
Here's the key takeaway. If you remember nothing else, karma is just momentum. That's it. It's like an object that's already in motion. Our emotional habits will just keep going in the same direction unless we do something to change their course. And every single time we choose not to react, every time we recognize an echo for what it is, we're gently, consciously applying the brakes. We're changing the trajectory, little by little.
So I want to leave you with this thought. Once you really get that a lot of your automatic feelings are just echoes from the past, it gives you this incredible sense of freedom right here in the present moment. Look, you can't change the echo that's already ringing in your ears, but you have 100% of the power to choose what new sound you make in this moment. So, what's it going to be?
All right, let's jump right in. Have you ever really stopped to think about what holds you together? I don't mean physically, but, that feeling of being the same person from one moment to the next. What's that invisible thread that connects the you who woke up this morning to the you who's listening to this right now? Well, we're going to dig into the unseen force that gives our consciousness its incredible stability. Seriously? Think about it. In that little silent space, that gap after one thought has fizzled out, but before the next one has popped up, what's there? Who are you in that moment? It's a pretty wild question, and the answer might just change how you look at your own mind. And this idea has been around for a long, long time. This quote here really sets the stage. It tells us our mind isn't just some random collection of thoughts. Nope. It's more like a river, conditioned and flowing. And our thoughts are what carve out the riverbed, directing where that stream of consciousness goes. So, let's talk about that river. We're going to explore the idea that underneath all the noise of our day-to-day thinking, there's a deeper, much quieter current. This is what some ancient psychological models called the Life Continuum, and it's a concept that really helps explain the architecture of our mind. Okay, so let's stick with this stream analogy. This underlying default state of your mind has a name. It's called the bhavanga. Just picture it as the steady, undisturbed flow of water. It's always there, always moving, even when you're not paying any attention to it. So then, what about all the stuff you do notice? Well, every time you see something new, or hear a noise, or have a specific thought, that's like a splash on the surface of the stream. It could be a little ripple, or it could be a giant wave. That's our active consciousness, the part of our mind that's engaged with the world. And here is the absolute key. When that thought is over, when the sound disappears, the stream doesn't just dry up. The water just settles. It goes back to its natural, quiet flow. See, your consciousness doesn't switch off. It just returns to its default resting state. So that resting state, that is the bhavanga. It's the life continuum. You can think of it like the background hum of your entire mental operating system. It's this deep, subconscious flow that connects all those separate moments, all the seeing, hearing, and thinking into one single coherent story of you. Okay, so how does this actually work from moment to moment? Well, the mind is basically seen as having these two main gears. There's the active, I'm thinking about something mode, and then there's that passive resting mode we've been talking about, the bhavanga. Let's break this chart down. Up top, you've got the active state. That's your mind reacting to things, processing information. Down at the bottom is the passive state. That's our deep river, the bhavanga, just keeping things running. But the really fascinating part is that one in the middle, the transition. You can think of it like a doorman. It's that split-second moment when your resting mind wakes up and turns its attention to a new sight or sound, right before it becomes a full-blown thought. Now, this brings up a really big question. If the bhavanga is our mind's default setting, where did that setting even come from? Well, this model has a pretty fascinating, maybe even a little controversial origin story. It suggests the programming for your default state didn't start when you were born, but actually at the very end of a previous life. And the key idea here is something called rebirth linking consciousness. It's described as the very first flash of awareness at the moment of conception. But here's the crucial part. The quality of that one single moment is said to define the quality of your underlying mental river, your bhavanga, for your entire life. So how is that first spark created? The model points to the very last moments of the life that came before. As the body shuts down, the mind pulls back from the senses and runs through one last, very quick thought process. And in that final flicker, it grabs onto a single, powerful mental object.
And that final object it locks onto, it can be one of three things. It could be a memory of a really powerful good or bad deed, or maybe it's a symbol related to that deed, like a doctor seeing a scalpel or a monk seeing a robe. Or it could be a flash, a vision of the destination to come. Whatever that final mental snapshot is, that's what gets carried over.
And this is where it all clicks. The quality of that final thought, whether it was peaceful or agitated or generous or angry, that becomes the seed for the next life. So the basic tone, the background hum of your mind right now, is said to be a direct echo of that one final moment. All right, so what does this echo actually look like in our day-to-day lives? Well, this framework actually sorts our built-in mental conditions into a few basic types. It's almost like a diagnosis of our mental starting point. So this table here lays out the different kinds of startup programs we can be born with. At one end, you might get an unwholesome state, maybe one that's naturally kind of dull or anxious. Then there's a two-rooted state, which is generally good-natured but maybe isn't naturally all that wise. But the most optimal one is called the three-rooted state. It's considered naturally bright, sharp, and discerning because it's already conditioned with non-greed, non-hate, and wisdom right from the start. And that three-rooted state, that's the real game changer here. According to this model, someone with this as their starting point has a natural leg up when it comes to developing real deep insight. It's like being born with a compass that's already pointing in the right direction. Now, it is so important to understand this point. This isn't about destiny or fate. It's not a sentence. It's a diagnosis. It's a map of your innate tendencies, the hand you were dealt at the beginning of the game. It helps explain why some of us might be naturally more anxious, while others seem to just get complex stuff without trying. It's the starting line, not the finish line. And that, of course, leads us to the biggest question of all. If this is our baseline programming, can we change it? Can we actually rewrite this fundamental code during our lifetime? So let's just ask it directly. Are we stuck with the hand we were dealt? Is this life continuum, this bhavanga that was set at conception, totally permanent? Or is there a way to actually change the fundamental frequency of our own consciousness? Well, it turns out there are two different schools of thought on this. The really strict orthodox view says, nope, it's fixed. The baseline you get is the baseline you have until your very last breath. But later interpretations began to argue that actually it is changeable. For example, a major trauma could essentially downgrade your baseline, making it more anxious. And on the flip side, a profound spiritual awakening could upgrade it, permanently shifting your mind to a clearer, more stable state. And that's really the thought I want to leave you with. It takes this whole ancient, complex model and makes it incredibly personal. Let's forget about past lives for a second and just think about your own mind's default setting right now, that background hum. If you had the power to change its fundamental tone, its basic frequency, what would you want it to become? What kind of river would you want your mind to be?